Welcome to Leave No Doubt. I've been joined by Jayden Stockley. Jayden, thank you for being here. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Nice welcoming you to my house.
Thank you for having me. For people listening, I have known you obviously for a long time, but I've never really been able to get into much detail with you about your career. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you. To get us started, mate, for people listening, obviously who might not know your story, you're Bournemouth's second youngest ever player. Now, in modern day football, the average age of players making their debuts is going up, but you were only 16 and still in school when you were asked to be part of the first team. When you reflect on that period of your time in your career now as a 28-year-old, what overriding memories do you have?
I think it's tough to say. You're living in a bubble at the time. I was so immature as well. Football was like a secondary thing for me. It was mainly still being with my mates. School, I took school semi-seriously, so I had so many things I was juggling, and it was just, I don't think I know for definite I didn't realise what was going on at the time.
Can you remember how you felt? What sort of feelings you were going through?
Well, the day I found out I'd be on the bench, I remember Eddie just driving past and saying, "Oh, Jayden, have you got a suit?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "You can be on the bench tomorrow, so find one." And then I think I was absolutely delighted. I think it was. I did have an ambition, so I did have an ambition from an early age to make my debut at 16. I wanted to make my first team debut at 16. I didn't want to turn 17. Just something about being 16. That was an ambition for me at the time.
16 is obviously, when you look at 16-year-olds now, I know 16-year-olds at the top level actually recently have been making debuts, and young guys 15 years old now have been included in matchday squads and things like that. But 16 is so young. How and when did you build that ambition that you wanted to make your debut at 16?
I think going from under 40, I always played a few ages up, so I was sort of playing under 18s football when I was meant to be an under 15, under 16. So I was always playing up, probably because of my size at the time. I mean, I was probably weighed about 40 kilos, but I was still about 6'3" going into.
You're the same size now as what you were when you were 14.
So I always played up, and I actually was fortunate enough to have Eddie as my manager in under 16. So it was probably little things like that went in my favour. Bournemouth being under an embargo at the time, not being able to actually have players on the bench, definitely played a part in that. Bournemouth as a club probably wanted to not use me, but sort of show the Football League, listen, we've got the assistant manager and a 16-year-old on the bench. Come help us out. Let's get some loans in. So there was probably a bit of that going on as well. But not that I cared at the time.
What was your understanding of first team football at the age of 15, 16? Like you say, you wanted to make a debut, but what did you actually know about what first team environment looked like and felt like, or what the game looked like at the time?
I didn't know anything in terms of sort of looking back. No, I didn't know any tactics. Don't remember anything in terms of going on. It was just at that age, I don't think you can drum that much into. I mean, the most coaching I got was under Joe Roach being an under 18. So it wasn't really like I knew a lot going on to the pitch. It was go on. And I think the club are probably open. As a young lad, he'll go on and get a goal and his value will skyrocket and they'll be able to sort the club out. I think that's probably what the golden scenario would be.
So what was like at that age though, and we're seeing it a lot at the moment, actually modern day football has moved on. A lot of younger guys are tactically more aware. They're probably technically more gifted. How did you become effective within the game? Like I'm interested to know, like you're obviously telling me that you weren't sure of what everything looked like. When did it start to click with you, like how to play the game, how to play a system, how to understand tactics?
I think where my journey is quite unique is, the emergency loan system was so beneficial in terms of it. Some of the loans I went on may not look like they were beneficial on paper. It would be like, 2 goals in 9 appearances, spending 2 months here and there. But like the different managers you work with, what you pick up from someone. I've played under so many different managers, like so many different clubs, seen so many different teams at such a young age. I think that was so beneficial for me at the time. Not necessarily, I didn't think I was picking up much, and there was plenty of head loss in them days, but I must have been subconsciously picking up little bits here and there, looking at players, catching players when I was 16, coming to the end of their careers, taking little bits off strikers. I mean, I've played with so many players and so many great strikers that you just pick up tiny little bits, and I hope that's turned me into the player I am now.
We will get into your loans, obviously, because you did have enough of them eventually. But going back on, obviously, to this 16-year-old Jayden Stockley that's involved in the first team, and I'm interested to know that 14, 15, 16-year-olds now, off the back of your experiences, what sort of advice might you have for them about how to navigate being involved in a first team, or what do they need to know if they're going to be involved in a first team at that age?
I think you've got to understand definitely a sacrifice you got to make. Certainly myself, there were times where I was quite an emotional lad. I didn't actually, it took me to about 21, 22 to actually get in control of every emotion I had. I was like super angry, super emotional, would take everything to heart. Every decision, whether it would be the first team calling up a different lad instead of me, then that would write me off for the week. I'd be like, oh, get me on loan. I don't want to be here anymore. So you've got to come to terms with the fact that it is a business. They'll bring people up through to benefit, the first team sessions, and you have to come to terms with that. It's not all going to be high flying every time. And even someone like me, I experienced my debut at 16, played my most football for Bournemouth when I was 17, 18, and then went backwards for a couple of years. So it was that time that I went backwards that made me realise, like how much I want it.
I'm interested to know, you say your ambition at 14, 15, obviously when you were playing up in the youth team and stuff, which is common now. A lot of young guys in academies are doing that. A lot of young guys in non-league football are doing that. But how did your ambition change, or what happened to your ambition when you did make your debut at 16?
There were chances to leave Bournemouth at the time. I know I ended up signing a long contract at Bournemouth, and sometimes I look back on whether that was the right decision or not, whether it is good to go as high as you can and drop down from there. So it was a case of I wanted to make as many first team appearances as possible. I was desperate to score goals, so that was the thing. I just need my first goal now for Bournemouth, and it was genuinely. I looked at players in that team, and I thought, I wish I could be like them one day. I saw, it was League Two at the time, so it wasn't as if we were talking about crazy money here. But I'm like, if I can get to that, that's my life made. Like that would be me sorted.
So how did your football lifestyle? I mean, obviously you were at school at the time. You say you spent a lot of time with your friends still. How did your football lifestyle change when you were exposed to the first team? What happened to the way you improved? What happened to the way you trained? Like, what do young guys at that age, 16, 17, 18, need to know about what they need to do to get to the level to play in a first team?
I think, the training is so important. I've always said that, and I've watched young lads do it, and you can tell straight away who has the hunger for it. It's the minutes on the training ground, how desperate you are to make the most of every possible minute on that training ground. Listen to every bit of advice the coach is going to give you, I think, and even to the point where you're annoying him after for advice, for anything. If you're off that training ground, then it's almost like you're forgotten about. If you're staying out there in the manager's face, so even if you're not having the best of times, it's a case of, like, I know how badly this kid wants it. He's not going to let me down when the chance is to go out there. Whereas if you've got a kid who's got good talent, but there's a question mark over his attitude, or how much hunger he actually has, I think you're going to give it to the other guy, just because managers, they're under pressure as well. They're going to give it to the person they trust the most.
Where did you learn that from? Was that from Eddie?
Yeah, it has to be from Eddie. That I think it was the discipline that you had to have to train under him. It was the standards he demanded, even in a passing drill, something I bring with me now. I think like something as small as a passing drill, I'll take so seriously. I will hate it if I make a mistake, and that's definitely something that comes from him, because of the pressure and how scared I was as a kid to you just wanted to impress him.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I actually had a moment when I think I was similar age to you, 18, 19, and I thought I had been training well.
Yeah.
And obviously for people listening, this is Eddie Howe at the time when me and Jayden were both at Bournemouth. he asked to speak to me after training on the training pitch, and I was thinking, oh, this is going to go really well. Like, I've trained well. Like, I'm on the edge of the team. Maybe he's going to tell me that he wants me to play a bit more. And he sat me down and tore into me about how little I stayed after training. Like, I didn't do enough extras. I wasn't obviously practicing enough after training had finished. And I couldn't at the times. I was too young to earn enough money to travel every day from Portsmouth and back, and I had to get in the car with the older guys to go home. So luckily he arranged for me to stay in digs, but that sort of mentality of doing extras, doing more, not accepting just doing a training session and that is it. Yeah. That came obviously from that moment. And we see it like obviously with the top guys at the top level who, if you just do what's being asked of you, it's often not enough. Yeah, definitely. There's definitely situations as well. I mean, I look at things like Harry Kane's little training after his extras he does, and the facilities he's got obviously plays a massive part. I mean, I've been at clubs where it's like, we've rented the pitch for an hour, you got to get off now, and it's like, oh, great. And he's got every mannequin going, 4 goalies that are ready to go in. So a lot of that plays a part. But I mean, there are ways to get around it, and I think that's what. Don't give yourself an excuse. There's the amount of finishings. That's probably why my groins are in bits now. But it's like the amount of finishing you used to do after training. You'd come off that pitch a few hours after the lads are gone. In those early moments of your career, was there anybody, we're talking about obviously the standards that Eddie Howard set in training, and that's obviously stuck with the pair of us, but was there any advice that maybe him or anyone else had given you that has stuck with you during that period of time? I think the main bit of advice that I remember it, when Eddie and Jason used to love that crossing and finishing drill. Do you remember? They just cross it and they just stand it up. It was a chance for him just to zing some balls in the box. But my something that put me apart from other people, I guess, was my ability in the air. And sometimes you can get sucked into thinking, I'm decent at playing as well. I'm going to drop in a little bit and get on the ball here. And he's just said, what you're good at, if it's say a 6, 7, 8 out of 10 now, make that a 10 out of 10. And that's going to be your standout attribute. Instead of obviously do work on the other things, but that your talent is in the air, make that as best as you possibly can. And that's something that has followed me in my career, something that I've practiced, even though, I rate myself in the air aerially at attacking crosses. That was something I practice all the time. Something that probably further on in this conversation, actually, that I wanted to get into you with. And, I've spent a bit of time working out how to really get into it with you. But understanding your attributes as a footballer is obviously, like, we're talking about you as a young guy, and that piece of advice that Eddie had given you is obviously really important and has stuck with you. But finding how to be effective as a footballer, like on a match day, is something that's really difficult, especially for a young guy. Like you've just said, like, oh yeah, I'm good at that, but I'm going to try and do this because I think I can do that too. Yeah. And it might not work out for you. We're seeing young players make their debuts, but to make an actual career and to showcase yourself in the best possible way, what was that process like for you to find out how you can be effective, and how important did it become for you, obviously, to, heading is my super strength, so I'm going to really work hard on that? I think it wasn't until later, actually, until I met Paul Tisdale, that I went on so many loans, spoke to different managers, almost like, get you through the door, you're playing this weekend. Not a lot was said. He was the first person who actually sat me down and asked me what sort of player I was, and I actually had to think for a second. I was like, what sort of player I am? What am I? Am I a poacher? Am I a target man? What sort of player am I? So he was the most personal manager I had in terms of, think about football for a second, not just as the Saturday, but what you want to be. And that loan in Exeter turned out to be the one, but it was an accumulation of, all those experiences I had, and him actually taking the time to actually sit and talk to me on a personal level, because I'd had unsuccessful loans, many of them, and he took a punt on me from something he'd seen. So it was a case of, sitting down, trying to discover the sort of player I am. And then it only takes you, I was getting games here and there. I think it takes you a run of games to also understand what sort of player you are at that age. What am I good at? What are the defenders going for here? What's getting me success in games?
it's only until you get plenty of minutes in professional football do you realise what's actually working for you. If I'd have scored different types of goals, then I might have gone down a different path.
So how important is it for you for young guys specifically to work out what kind of player they are? How can they say, if they're not cracking it in the first team or they're not exposed to professional minutes, they're still 15, 16, 17, and they might be playing at a National League level or non-league level, whatever it might be, wherever they're playing. How can they work out what they're effective at, in your opinion?
I think in terms of like academies, I've seen many players. Obviously, I'm at Charlton at the moment, and I'm seeing players, and I'm like, I never thought about that as a kid. These players look technically on a different level to what like anyone that I've seen are, but they're learning the game so much different to what I did. I think they've got to bring as much as, you know, a first team can play a system and it's going to filter all the way down to the academy. So you don't want to produce robots, but you also want to produce people who can perform on the day in that system. So I think it's a case of trying to bring something that's noticeable to your game, whether that be this guy, this number 8 doesn't stop running in behind the striker. That's his thing. He's gonna score goals. It's a winger's movement, a delivery of a cross. Like, you know, 8 out of 10 times a winger's going to put the ball on the money. Whether a fullback's got the engine just to get up and down. It's little things like that. I think you've got to have a little niche. You've got to have something that says, I'm the best at this in the team, not a number 10 who can stay in the pocket, who's good on the half turn. You know, there might be 3 or 4 of them in that team. You've got to bring something to you. This number 10's good, but he doesn't stop running either. He's aggressive with his press. You've got to have something that you look around your team and think, I'm the best at this in the team. And if I wasn't in this team, they'd miss me.
I'm interested to know, you have had, I mean, you're only 28, mate, but you have had a really good career. If you could go back to being 16-year-old Jayden Stockley, would you have done anything differently?
I think I would have taken it a little bit more seriously. And it's easy to say that now, because when you're in the times, like, you feel like you are. I'd have had a bit more confidence. I was a little bit shy in the sort of like hiding a touch in training, not really demanding it, and not really putting everything into it. And that's probably something I look back on. Maybe I was more than what I'm giving myself credit for. Maybe I'm battering myself a bit, but it's so hard to do that, especially when you've got the talent around you. Sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's a bit of luck. I knew from an early age it probably wasn't going to work out for me at Bournemouth, so I used to make a conscious decision to go on loan every season. It was a case of, I don't want to sit around in the 23s. For me personally, for where I'm at mentally, I need to get out playing men's football.
It's nice that you've moved on to that, mate. But you signed a long contract at Bournemouth, didn't you? You signed like a 6-year deal when you were 16. So obviously the club had a lot of intentions for you. At 16, when you signed a 6-year deal, well, how did that make you feel? Like, what sort of happened to your football ambition at the time?
I just thought, that's going to be me for the next few years. I'm going to play as many appearances as I can for Bournemouth and hopefully play games and then go. I've seen Bournemouth was sort of a feeder club at the time. Danny Ings was someone who played with me in the youth team. Vokesy was someone I watched. Brett Pittman, someone who went as well. So I was like, this is a striker's dream. There, just getting the team and then you're off. Like, that was my ambition. Eddie had left at the time. I played the most under Lee Bradbury, so it was that sort of relationship. The chairman said on many occasions at the time, Eddie Mitchell, that I was going to get sold. So it was sort of, you believe in your own hype at the time. You're almost thinking this is like not too easy, but it's like, yeah, my path's already in stone here. I'm going to play a few games, now I'm going to be off.
So when you were involved, obviously, as a young age at Bournemouth, I was a little bit older than you, but I was probably still going through the same thing, not really starting, trying to be involved as a substitute, coming on and making an appearance. But the age in which you were at, the under-21s, under-23s actually was created whilst you were sort of in the middle of that contract. So I can remember you obviously being involved with the first team all the time and then having to almost step down, as you've already mentioned it already, taking maybe a step back. But you then were involved in that age group of under-21s, under-23s, where training becomes uncompetitive, like the match days obviously aren't competitive. How difficult was it for you to go from an exciting young player, one of the youngest ever to play for the club, signed a big deal, to finding yourself having to move around the country on loan alongside, this training and match day experience with under-21 football? Was it tough?
Yeah, that was probably the hardest period of my career, really, in terms of I wasn't emotionally ready for football yet. I hadn't, because I'd experienced such highs before that, and everything had gone really well ever since I was like probably like under eights at Bournemouth. It was always playing up. It was always, and then the moment I had to come down, seeing lads younger than me then go up to the first team, leave you training, because they wouldn't necessarily care about the under 23s training. If the first team wanted to take 6 lads from training and leave you sort of in a pickle and like with 8 lads trying to tear about, then they would. We trained at a different facility, so I'd gone from like having lunch in the canteen with the boys to then having it as like a social club around the corner. So it like standards, all my mates were first team lads, so like I had none of my mates, even though they were my age, a few of them, none of them were my mates. So it's like I'd been absolutely banished from my pals, from football, and that's why, because a part of it was embarrassment. I just wanted to go on loan. I was like, I can't be around it. And the only person who really saved me at that time was Stephen Purchase, because he was so good at talking to me, and I actually wanted to do it for him, like train as much for myself. Like for him, I didn't want to like bob his sessions off and kill him.
I spent a lot of time with Stephen Purchase as well, so we'll get into the impact that he had on your career in a minute, but that sort of feeling, like you're talking about there, of embarrassment and having to go backwards and being frustrated. How ultimately did you manage to deal with those emotions? Because they're tough, and I think a lot of people, hopefully, who are listening, a lot of young guys in football at the moment can relate that you might not be the player who gets to train with the first team, or you might not be the player that's involved on a match day, or you might feel like you're on a level and be asked to go and play at a lower level. Football is tough. Like, how important is it that people realise that how difficult actually emotionally that football is?
I think in terms of, you can make a decision that way. Say for this example, that someone gets called up instead of you, that day's training could be a write-off for many. I think it's those players that can put that to the back of their mind and use that as motivation that normally are the ones who succeed. If you can use that, at that age, I wasn't the best at using that as a motivation. And then you slide further down, and then it's like, yeah, see, that's why we didn't call you up, Jayden, because I'd lose my head for the day. And it'd be like, that's exactly why you didn't get called up to the first team, because you have reactions like that. Whereas some lads would, get on with it and train well, and they'd reap the rewards of that. They'd use that as the added motivation. So now I can look back on it now and see that as the response you should have, albeit not very easy to make at the time. And I probably wasn't ready for that at the time. But a lot of lads that I see nowadays have seemed to have that attitude, and almost more grown up than I was at the time. It is tough. Football is it's so cruel. It is a business at the end of the day. They need a certain amount of numbers for training. Sometimes they won't even call up the best player. It'll be, we just need this position. You're getting called up. You're just getting used to get called up. So there's that person's chance.
So what was the pull of the loan system at the time? Obviously you went on many of them. You went on, I've got them down here. I won't name all the clubs, but you went on 9 in 5 years, like you, the king of a loan at one point. But what was the pull of going on loan rather than staying in that environment? It
was as a striker trying to score goals in games that mattered. I mean, you could score a silly amount of goals for the 23s and not get any recognition for it. I mean, one day that absolutely made me lose my head was we played Brentford. I think I scored like four assists, and we won 10-0, and I did not get around the first team for it. So I thought, this is, what am I here? Why am I here? It's absolutely ridiculous. I need to get out playing men's football. I need to make a career for myself, because I can only see this going one way. I'm going to be out of football if I stay here. My contract's going to be done here. I wouldn't have gone anywhere, and I'll just be done. I have to play for a local team around my area. So I took it upon myself to go on the loan. Sometimes I feel like I got forced on certain loans that I didn't want to go on. Leighton Orient being one, for example, I went to, and they already had 3 main strikers. So it was a case of, this ain't ever going to work for me personally. They're on such a high. I'm just going here for backup. And I think if there's any advice I can give someone young going on loan, it's have a chat with the manager if possible, and just see where you fit in.
What is the process for young guys? Obviously, trying to give them an insight into what a loan looks like and how important that it might be. But what is the process of how a loan works? Like, you've obviously just said that you decided upon yourself that that's what you wanted to do. From the moment you decide that that's what you want to do, what happens? Who do you talk to? How do you talk to them?
I think where possibly I could have been in a privileged situation here, I obviously being making my debut at such a young age, I had an agent who had a name in the game, so who could probably get me at clubs easier than lads, maybe normal 16, 17-year-old lads who didn't have that name in the game. So I'm probably talking from a privileged situation in that case. I was in League One, going on loans in League Two as a 17-year-old. Like, that don't really happen. You have to drop down a few levels to play. Like, for example, lads at Charlton are dropping down to Conference South to play. So in that regard, I was very lucky. But I think you got to take a step back. You got to look at where you are in your career. Where's going to benefit you? Look at the style of play. Like, that is what you got to research. Look at their style of play. Are you going to fit in? I've seen so many lads say, they just don't play to my strengths. Like, we just don't do this. We just don't do that. I was thinking, you knew exactly what sort of team we were. If you'd have looked into it, you'd have known that and buy into different systems, because when a manager's chop and change all the time, you're going to have to adapt to different systems in your career. So we as footballers love moaning about absolutely everything. So, and it's never our fault either. So it's just take a bit more responsibility on your career.
What happens when you take more responsibility, do you think?
I just think that you get a bit more modest. You blame yourself for stuff. You understand what you're doing wrong. If you're constantly blaming people, I've been in that situation many times in my career. We're just not crossing the ball, so I'm not going to score goals. And it's almost a little bit of a cop out. It's like, well, find another way then to score some goals. Like, it can't be everyone else's fault. Like this, especially when you've had a few unsuccessful loans on the bounce. Find something that is going to work for you, and just that. And part of growing up is that, again, accepting that things are your fault.
You went through an awful lot when you were young, emotionally. And I know this obviously because I was your teammate at the time, being involved in the first team, and then managers coming in, and then for whatever reason deciding you weren't going to be involved. I want to talk about a little bit of a period of time when you were at Bournemouth, without obviously naming names and putting you under the spotlight too much. But when you're young, and for whatever reason a manager comes in and he decides that you're not going to be part of his plans, how do you approach that situation? How did you approach that situation? And looking back, is there anything that you wish you could have done differently? Like, how did you feel emotionally? Like, how much of a problem, or not a problem, but how difficult is it to navigate a situation where managers, for whatever reason, doesn't see you in his plans?
It's a lot of it is reaction for me. I was, obviously, it's saying again, I was an emotional lad. So, for example, I started Lee Bradbury's last game in charge in League One away at Oldham. The week after, I was being left out of a reserve side because a new manager came in and just bombed me, and that was at the age of 18. So that was something that I'd never experienced a low like that before. Obviously going from such a high, thinking I've cracked it, all the work I've done under the previous manager at this young age has got me to this point. Then suddenly I'm the young lad that's easy to drop. It's really tough. It's I'm not going to say I did like a secret formula to get me through each day. I tried to find motivations from elsewhere, from friends, from other people. I remember asking Eddie for advice because he was, I think, at Burnley at the time, just trying to come up with something to do, because at the time the manager's in charge, it seemed to be very personal against me. So whether I'm or not, it was because I made the jump so early up to the first team. It was something that I didn't come back from very well, and it took me probably a year or so to actually come back from that, like, mentally.
Like, a lot of what we've spoken about is you dealing with things emotionally, and having known you as well as I do. Like, I know you were a frustrated guy at the time. Like, I'd spent a lot of period of time myself, obviously working with Stephen Purchase. I was involved in those sessions that maybe didn't have the numbers, and the pair of us would be frustrated about the situation that we were in. But in terms of your football lifestyle, I mean, obviously, like you're a super talented footballer, big physical guy. Like your football lifestyle, I want obviously people who are young to know that despite all the frustration that you had, despite the setbacks and the positives, the negatives, the ups, the downs, like what did your football lifestyle look like? Like how were you getting the best out of yourself?
And I didn't, I wasn't, because I was friends with the first team lads so young. I was going out, not necessarily like, I'm not talking stupid amounts, but I was mixed with their social circles. It was a case of I'd meet for a coffee with the boys. They'd finish their training, I'd finish my training. I'm an 18-year-old sat there in a coffee shop with the first team lads just all day, just talking absolute rubbish. So I away from football, living at my girlfriend's parents' house, it wasn't a case of me being in total control of everything around me. I was semi-dedicated to the way I ate. Training for me was always, I would always put everything into training. My fitness pre-season was always a big one. I'm not naturally the best runner anyway, so I would put, a lot of work into that. And it was a lot of it, looking back, probably could have done better with what I had. But at the time, I feel like I was trying to make the best of a situation I was in. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't didn't have next to zero money. You know what it was like at Bournemouth back in the day. It was your contract would go up 50 quid every year. It wasn't, you're not talking mega bucks. People probably think Bournemouth as where they are now as to, when I was an under 16 there, we didn't know whether we'd have a club the week after and you'd have to go somewhere else. So it was completely different. And looking back, I could have been more professional, but I was so young and, to be honest, didn't have the knowledge to be any better.
How do you think, obviously, in the modern game now that we're talking right now, that the access that young players get to the information that's going to obviously improve them, how do you think that's changed?
They get so much more information. They get meetings. They get advice from the first team. They're so much closer with the first team. For example, if you're under 23, that's actually even next to the first team on the pitch. I think that's beneficial. Sit there and watch. Take the time to sit there and watch their system. Them on a Friday when they're doing tactical work. If that was me at that age, I'd have just sat and watched. The player in my position, what he does. I think the big part of us being training in a different facility, I just don't think that can ever be beneficial for a football club. Just out of sight, out of mind, I found. So I think that, certainly young lads need to use everything they've got around them, tap in, all the so-called being busy, but just ask people for advice. There's so many people around the club that want to help. And I think footballers are a lot more approachable. You don't have that old school banter anymore where the first team lads, are nasty or playing tricks on the young lads. This doesn't really exist anymore. So, use that to our advantage. Young lads are coming into our dressing room like they've always been there, so much more confident. And it's great to see because I wasn't like that at that age.
So come on then, we've spoken about obviously the emotions that you've gone through as a young guy at Bournemouth, the emotions you've gone through in being on loan and how important that was for you. But the first time you moved permanently to another club, you went to Aberdeen, which is obviously a complete new environment, complete new country, complete new style of football. It seemed common for, obviously talented young players, English young players really now to go to Scotland to play football. So what was the pull at the time about Scottish football? What can anybody obviously listening to this who has a sniff of going to Scotland to play football, what can they benefit off the back of your experience?
I'd go. I mean, I was on loan at Exeter, had the most prolific spell of my time. Could have, probably taken the safer route and signed a contract to Exeter. But it was the unknown for me. It was the ambition of, seeing. I was a big United fan, so the Fergie thing resonated.
Was it really?
Yeah, that resonated with me massively. I was like, I knew Fergie won the Cup Winners' Cup there. I want to go there and have a look around. And I went and had a look before I signed, so I didn't agree anything. I went and looked. I think that's massively important. Don't sign anything without looking there. People, you can be pushed into it, but I went up there, had a look around. It felt right at the time, and it was another ambition that I wanted to do. You don't understand how much they love football up there. It's like just a different culture. Like it's such a massive club as well. The lads, I was still quite young going there looking back, but I felt as if I was older just because of how they treated you. It's just I hadn't been treated like that in a really long time and wanted like that for a long time.
Is there a difference? I found this obviously after having left Bournemouth, because when you're a young player at a club, you've mentioned once already that you can become the young player is easy to drop.
Yeah.
When you left and obviously signed for Aberdeen, permanently, do you have a certain different way around the changing room? Do people perceive you differently than just the young lad who's easy to drop? Do you know what I mean?
Signings, if you're a manager signing, you all they can say it all they want, but you get treated slightly different. You either get that 1-2 more games in the side. You do, because the manager or the club have signed you for a reason. A young lad, in my experience, I found at Bournemouth, and from what I've seen around different clubs as well, is it's easy to leave the young lad out of the squad on an away trip. They're not going to cause any harm. Let's take 19 players. This lad won't be fuming about being left out. And the young lads listening to this need to accept that's not a personal thing. Sometimes they just want to protect what the cohesion of the squad. They don't want to. If you leave an experienced lad out, it could cause carnage in the long run. So it's something that you need. It is very a delicate situation, really.
One of the, I don't want to talk about regrets. I certainly don't have regrets, but I think one of the things that I wish that I had done, and I say this lightly because obviously my time at Bournemouth ended up with not being directly involved, but being around promotions and being around successful teams and this fairy tale Bournemouth that got from League Two to the Premier League. I was there, but I wasn't obviously involved.
Yeah.
That sometimes I wish that I had left earlier, because then I probably could have had more of a football career myself. Is that something that you wish?
Yeah, definitely. I had a chance to go, I think, nearly every year really to sign somewhere permanently. But Bournemouth, who were in charge of me, and fair enough, they put a lot of time into my development since a young age, were offering me 1-year deals really, and nothing beyond that. And it was just a case of tribunal. Clubs weren't willing to pay probably what I'd cost at that time. So I was desperate to leave every year. I had a chance to leave to go to Portsmouth, sign a 3-year contract with them when I was 19. That Bournemouth said no and offered me a 1-year deal, and things like that are extremely frustrating. And they have every right to, I guess. They've been paying your wages for as long as possible. So it's a business decision. They're probably thinking, if this is the season for Jayden, then we can sell him for a lot of money. I wish I did leave sooner. Personally, for me, I felt like as soon as I did, things went on the up for me.
How so? Like, what happened when you went to Aberdeen? I know obviously you became a first team player, but what was the big differences that you felt like you were going for in your career?
I just got away from my safety net, really. I had a cushion at Bournemouth. I was always the young up-and-coming lad at Bournemouth. As soon as I put myself in a situation where I felt like I had to scrap for myself and it coincided with me having our first child, me and my missus. So it was. I had a reason to scrap and stay in the game, and I think that's what brought the best out of me. I realised I had this, fight in me, this ambition to carry on playing football. I actually realised, hang on, I actually do want to have a career. A lot of lads get to that age and realise maybe this ain't for me now. But it was nice for me to think, no, I love the game. I absolutely love it somewhere else. Don't just like it at Bournemouth. I've gone somewhere else and I love it just as much, if not more. So it was a realisation for me to think I actually want a career in this game.
Do you wish that you had set, I know you're talking about ambition, but do you wish that you had set goals, or obviously decided, you're talking about scrapping for a career, do you wish that you had created that mindset a little bit earlier?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, I wish I left Bournemouth probably even younger to go to the bigger club at the time. Maybe it could have gone wrong for me. It could have gone horrendous, but that's the unknown, really. I wouldn't say regrets, because I did learn a lot at Bournemouth, but I also feel like I wasted a lot of time, at least a season or two. I know I played a lot of games in my career and I started at a really young age, but it was probably something that could have just been fast forwarded that little bit more, and I could have got out there probably a little bit sooner.
The last couple of days I've watched a lot of highlights that you've, games you've been involved in, goals you've scored, interviews that you've done. And some of the goals he scored at Aberdeen obviously were top level. But something that I was interested to find out was that you obviously played with James Madison at the time. He was at Aberdeen at the same time as you. Was he, obviously he plays at the top level now, he's super successful, super talented. When he was a bit younger, he went on loan obviously to Aberdeen. Was he as talented as what he is now? Like what is it that was so special about him?
He just had that niche, like I'm saying. He could score goals from outside the box. His set pieces were absolutely frightening. He just had that. That's probably the first time I've never seen like a wand of a foot before. So it's like everyone's got a good free kick or whatever, but he's probably the first player I actually looked and thought, that's next level ability. That's inner confidence. And he was a cocky lad as well. So it was like, but nice cocky. It's like I wish I had that arrogance about me when I was his age in the first team. Like that's what gets you by. That is what, when I've seen that in young lads, I've thought he's got a chance because he's not scared around any of the boys. Obviously, he was way a bigger level than us. I'm talking about young lads that come into, say, our training now. If I see that they've got a bit about them, it just instantly gets them a bit of respect. Even if they have a little pop, if they have a little chew back, even at the time they might get slaughtered for it, it's like, at least he's not going to roll over here. Maddis he was good. He was, like, in terms of ability, the best I've ever played with. And I was on the duty a lot at Aberdeen, so I got a front row seat watching how good he was.
There's actually a tweet thing that is circulating at the moment from 2013 where he's tweeted, "My teacher today told me that being a footballer is 1 in a million, and I told him I was going to be that one." So even probably from an early age when he was at school, I think obviously you referring to him as cocky is probably accurate. Yeah. Obviously I don't know him, but was it evident? You're talking about a wand of a right foot. Like, people were obviously naturally gifted. I'm sure he's got some sort of natural talent, but was he working hard at that? Like, was he?
He'd work at his, like, for example, me with the crossing and heading, he'd work at his set pieces constantly. So that was his thing at the time. And I think he was on loan from Norwich at the time under Alex Neil. And obviously I haven't played under Alex Neil. I know the sort of system he wants to play. So at that time, I don't think he was ready for that off the ball. That's certainly the way that Alex Neil wants to play. So he'd practice his dead balls, his free kicks, his shooting outside the box, because that's the first thing you think of when you think of him. He's capable of the spectacular.
What happened to your football game when you joined Aberdeen? Obviously, you become a first-team player. Obviously, you probably become or feel a little bit more important. You don't feel like the young guy anymore. And we were talking, obviously, originally about how to become effective and how to realise how you can affect a match day. What happened to you, in that period of time, and what sort of player did you become?
I feel like a little bit I went too far the other way. I feel like I turned into just a target man, someone who just headers the ball, someone who sort of gets used as, that person to bring it up to. And I was, if you look at the brilliant target men around, they're normally sort of 28 above. They're normally coming into their peak at 30. They know everything about their body. I was still quite lightweight, could get pushed around easily. My timing was good, but I didn't have that ability to sort of hold people off. It was something that I got sent off a lot that season. I realised that the refs weren't on my side early doors. That was the main reason I got out of there. But it was nice to be used. I mean, I had very good games. I had awful games as well. So it was a case where I'd get bullied one week and then I'd be the one bullying the week after. So it was such fluctuating emotions every week. Frustration for a lot of it, but also unique experiences that I would never have got elsewhere playing in front of the crowds that I did. Frustration
and the word frustrated is something that we've spoken about, quite a bit already in this conversation. Have you managed to find a way to deal with frustration? You can imagine, obviously football, like a lot of people get frustrated, we all do. But you certainly more than most in my career of teammates were at the top of the list of people obviously who let frustration get to them. Have you found a way to deal with that, or is it something that is still an ongoing?
No, I still definitely deal with it. I think my missus, for example, I feel like I'm quite good at dealing with failure or dealing with something that hasn't gone right, but she knows straight away. It's like you do bring it home with you, whether or not you think that you do or not. It's it's tough to deal with. Like it's not an easy career for anyone thinking that they're going to come up and not experience anything like it. Is delusional. You're going to have a setback pretty much. It's going to be constant, and the highs you can only really enjoy for not too long because there's a game to come. So it's I dealt with them. I realised at the time at Aberdeen, I had a great year with great people, played under a great manager I really, really got on with. Only stayed there for a year, and then that was another decision I think that people have to make. It was a case of I had a 2-year contract, could have stayed, could have played my part, could have had possibly had another good season there, and it was just this isn't what something's not working. It's like the refs aren't on my side. I'm not playing as well as I should be. I can see this only going one way, really. Another season of, averageness, really, according to me. And, fans weren't on my side, which is, a unique experience. I remember there was Adam Rooney was a ledge there. He scored so many goals. And if I started a game after 50 minutes, the fans would be chanting for Rooney. But then I'd eventually be subbed to feel like it would last. The fans probably thought I was on for about 3 hours, but I was only on for about 50 minutes, and then they'd applaud when I was getting taken off, and I was 21 at the time. I was like, God, this is decent. We get off, and I'm just sat there, and then probably Runes would come on and score the winner, and I'll just be sat there well done, Runes. Well, that's great, mate. So, but then that's a brilliant situation. I might be in a situation in my career when I'm not having the best few games, and I'm left in just because of the reputation I've built. So it works both ways.
That's such a unique thing, obviously, that it's not spoken about quite a lot in football. And obviously we're probably highlighting, obviously, in these conversations and on this podcast about that hopefully people listening can improve their own football off the back of what you're talking about. But the reception that people get for fans, let's be totally honest. Players love to be loved.
Yeah.
And if fans are into you, it gives you an ego boost.
Yeah.
If they don't like you, it's easy for that to affect you and for you to start playing within yourself or to start obviously not enjoying your football at all. So I think it's really interesting, obviously, that you say that fans at Aberdeen at the time that you felt had more of a connection to Rooney, that they liked him a little bit better. And obviously they wanted him to play, but ultimately it must have felt rubbish. It must have been a really difficult feeling for you to have to deal with. How did you manage to figure that out?
I guess it's tough because it works both ways. I feel like you have to have that instant success to initially get them on your side, and then you have to be consistent and maintain that for a period of time for you to earn that love. I mean, fans just won't give you it. I mean, I have seen examples where I think the fans have been on someone, they loved him, and I thought, oh my word, he's terrible. And the players are looking at each other what's going on here? How has he got a chant? But it's just a natural thing with fans. You get that rapport with a fan base, and I think it's something that I've been searching for a lot in my career, and it almost gives you a heads up. They do play a massive part in a player's career at a football club. I think if they're on you, it just speeds things up a bit. It speeds a sub up. It speeds this person's time up at the club. And it's their club at the end of the day. So I've got if they want me out of the club, I'm happy to go. I'm not gonna stay there, and I want to play games of football. I'm not gonna stay somewhere I'm not wanted.
I think there's in football, I speak about it a little bit with people, that there's players and supporters players. Yeah. And obviously that the players are the guys that fellow teammates or opponents appreciate, he's a good player, he never gives the ball away, he spots a really nice pass, or he's got a great delivery, he's a great defender, whatever it might be, whatever their strength is, that players appreciate, but fans might not notice.
Yeah.
Has it been important for you in your life to be a player's player or to be a supporter's player?
I think I love being a player. There's no better feeling than coming to the changing room and the lads loving you and what you do. Obviously, you want to be, you ideally want to have both. The players, but if a player, obviously getting the players' player of the season, something like that, I think it's the biggest award you can get, because it's that inner confidence that the lads know what I'm doing. I remember seeing a few things of Brad Potts, who used to play at Preston. I remember fans used to call him lazy, and we used to get the stats in every week, and he'd top the running stats in games every week, and I'm just like, we're watching different games. This guy is running around the whole pitch. So it's so strange. I'd love both, because I've met so many different fans, and fans sometimes get a bad bit of bad press, like the way they are in stadiums. But you meet fans out on the street, and they're top notch. And Preston was a place where they were so great around the city at speaking to them, and they knew their football really well. So it was. But going back to the question, I think being a player's player is something that gets you far in your career, because those words from fellow players to managers down the line get you other moves, people speak to players at the end of the day, not managers speak to players. They don't speak to fans to sign players.
So moving on from Aberdeen, obviously you're talking about the reasons why you might have left, but Exeter spent a record amount of money on you, which must have felt nice at the time, but also brings with that price tag is people now at the top level, like we're only talking, I know it's 100 grand and they were a League 2 team at the time, but it does bring a certain amount of pressure. How did you manage to deal with that pressure? Yeah,
looking back, it was because I'd experienced a loan there. I didn't really feel much pressure at all. I felt at home going back there. It was somewhere I knew I was capable of scoring goals. My confidence had taken a knock at Aberdeen, so I was coming from quite a low place at the time. Started that season for Aberdeen, played a few games. I think I had a shocker in Europe. We played somewhere and I was minging, played a game, so I wasn't coming off the best form. And then played like a few training sessions at Exeter, and it slowly was coming back, and I thought, yeah, like I'm loved here again. Like it's nice, and I scored a goal early doors, and I think making a contribution early is massive in a footballer, especially a striker. Like things can stay on your mind. I've always been fortunate enough to get a goal pretty early into my career wherever I've been, so I think that normally sets you off on the path. You got to hit the ground running. For any player going on a loan, try and make that impact as early as possible. No easier said than done, but it's a case of stamp your authority early doors and show people what you're about.
There's never a way to properly know what's going to happen when a player moves from one club to another. A lot of guys obviously can, whether it be obviously you as a substitute at Aberdeen, it might be happening to a lot of guys at the moment where they might not be a first team player at their club at the moment. How difficult for you was the process of deciding when was the right time to leave without really truly knowing whether or not it was going to be successful or not? And how can other people, obviously, who are listening to this, who might be in the same situation, who might be struggling at the club they're at, make a decision on what's best for them, whether to leave or to stay?
I think you get a feeling of how close you are. I think you get that, whether it be cup games, whether if you're getting a sniff in cup games, and then it's really the sort of team you're going to. Don't jump at a team because your mate's there or because it's location-wise it's easy. I mean, I think I'm the prime example. I went Aberdeen, Accrington, I'm a Bournemouth lad. I'd go anywhere in search of the best possible route for my career. It was, don't go down the road because it's 10 minutes away, I can still live with them. Like, take a risk. Put yourself into the unknown, because I think then you realise what sort of character you are. That would be my advice. Away from the whole football, obviously, do everything right, train long. It's prepare yourself for a career in football. You're going to experience different things in life. I've lived in some unbelievable places because of my journey in football, and I've taken my kids around the world in places that around the UK. They're like breathtaking, really. So it's something that I look back on with so much fondness. Whether or not everything happened right on the football field, I made the most to make my family life, stable and enjoyable.
No matter what level that you're at, obviously, like whoever it listens to this, whether at the top level or the bottom level, how important is it that people or that players play instead of obviously be the guy who's constantly a substitute and might not be in squads? How important is actually playing the game for someone's career? Yeah,
it's massive, because you just iron out those mistakes. You iron out mistakes. You discover the play you are. Like I said earlier, you discover what works. You don't get that from, as much as you can take advice and you can watch players play. You're not going to get the best sort of experience. Whether you have to drop down a level. I went on loan to Orient, who were top of League One, wasn't playing. And then I went to the conference for the second half of the season and had a really good second half of the season with Woking. So it wasn't I wasn't embarrassed to do that. It was the best thing for my career. I thought scoring goals at a lower level is better than sitting on the bench at a higher level. If you're gonna ask a team at the end of the season, who do you want? You're gonna want the person who's been scoring goals. So I didn't see that as, dropping down at all. That was that along with the Exeter loan was the best thing I've done. So don't be embarrassed of where you're going on loan. You should be embarrassed if things haven't gone right. If you drop down somewhere, go and prove that you're too good for that level then.
Unfortunately, you didn't win an award for this stat, and I think you should, but you scored the most goals in a calendar year in 2018 in the Football League, is that right?
Yeah, my dad gave me a special award that he made.
Did he really?
I think it's upstairs somewhere.
That was brilliant. I mean, that should be an award.
I know, I was gutted. I was like, bit of recognition from someone. Us down in League 1 and 2 don't get any awards. Come on.
Yeah, I know. As terms of stats go, including all of the strikers, it did include the Premier League as well?
Yeah, it was everything, yeah.
In all the people who play, obviously, in this country at whatever level, to score the most goals in a calendar year, 2018, is pretty impressive, mate. What clicked in that year? Like, what was it? What happened?
It was going onto the pitch, and I guess only strikers could resonate with this a little bit, or attacking players. It's knowing I could have a beast like during this game, or I could start not very good. I'm not chasing a goal. Like, it's going to naturally come to me. I know where I need to be in the box. I've developed relationships around the pitch where if that chance comes, I'm going to score. If I miss a chance, I'm not under that pressure. Because I've built that reputation for myself. I'm not under that pressure. I'm going to get dragged after 60. I'm going to get another chance in this game just by being patient, by sticking to the things that have given me success already. Because I've experienced scoring goals already, I'm not chasing that. I'm not dropping deep. I'm not making extra runs. I'm sticking to my game. And that's coming back to knowing your own game. I'm not going to start running channels, running around everywhere, making different movements in the box. Eventually that goal will come. And I can't say, even if I went, 2-3 games at Exeter without scoring, it would play on my mind. I got obsessed with goals, so I got obsessed with the better in 1 and 2 ratio at Exeter. That's what I wanted to beat, and things like that. That started, and I've got it now at Charlton. Like, it's just an obsession really that you want your stats to be better than 1 and 2.
As a striker, obviously, we're talking about your career, so people who are listening who might play in defence, so there might be goalkeepers, midfielders, whoever, might not be able to relate to this. But in terms of mindset on your game and your goals, do you think being a striker, that mindset is important, being obsessed with goals? Do you think that's important? Do you wish that you had that obsession earlier in your career? Yeah,
definitely. I wish that I did. I've seen, young lads with it now, and I wish it came to me early. It definitely was with me up into the ages of 16 in the youth, at Bournemouth. That was always a massive thing for me. And then it got to a stage at Bournemouth where, because I was playing higher up, I sort of just making an appearance would become an achievement. And that's not the way to look at it. It should still be scoring goals. That's your job. So that's probably where I came off it for a couple of seasons, where I accepted that appearances was my achievement, where it should never have been.
I'm buzzing that your dad gave you an award for that, by the way, because I remember thinking that's incredible, but
it's engraved.
It's not like you don't get made a fuss of for it. But so off the back of that 2018 year, obviously you did leave in January. You went back to the Championship with Preston, but I'm interested to know, like, we've spoken about how you feel when you end up feel like you're going backwards, and how Aberdeen might not work out and you end up in Exeter, but there is going to be times, and hopefully everybody who's listening to this conversation in their football career has moments where they're massively successful and everything seems to be going right for them. They get interest in higher clubs. What was that period of time? What was that process like? That, you were obviously top boy at Exeter. You'd scored the most goals, again, don't mind saying it again, in a calendar year in obviously the country. How did you know that people were interested in you? What does that process look like? How does that process feel like?
It was brewing for quite a long time. It potentially could have left in that summer. Decided to stay with the club, have another good season, back it up, and hopefully finish with some stats. But I had, so this is another thing for especially attacking players, but I'm sure that you can get it all around the pitch. But I had a release clause in my contract as well. So you've got to protect yourself off the pitch as well for young lads. So I think that's a massive, know what you're signing. I signed a quite a realistic release clause when I signed back at Exeter. So, put them things in your contract. Try and test yourself. I know not everyone's got the pull to do that, but at least ask the question. Don't be afraid of asking a question. I had it in there, and in the January, it was almost inevitable that I was going to go. I started the season well, and then I had a very good December, which is always, important if you want to go in January. It sort of clicked in December. And the lads know you're going to go. The manager knows you should go, and Exeter were absolutely incredible with actually helping me along that journey as well. Go and look at the clubs. Go and see, we want you to go and have a great career. Pick the club you want to. I don't think many clubs would be like that, but Exeter was unbelievable, and that's why I'll always absolutely love everything about that club. They let me go with their best wishes, and allowed me to make a decision based purely on football. And it was because it happened gradually building up to January. It allowed us as a family to accept that we're probably gonna be moving.
I think people often talk about, especially football fans, about the difference in levels. Like, would this player be able to make it at that level? Or, would a National League player, Jamie Vardy, for example, they look at them and say, could he be the next Jamie Vardy? Can he, go higher? What are the immediate differences that people need to be aware of, players need to be aware of when talking about going up to a high level? You went from a League Two side, I think Exeter, obviously, they were successful at the time, but a League Two side into the Championship. What are the immediate differences? How did you need to adapt?
I think it was understanding the game a bit more, understanding different systems, I learned so much under Alex Neil in terms of the football tactics that I'd never experienced before. The intensity of training came back. So from what I experienced under Eddie was back with him. So it was something that I was buzzing about, because I love being put under that pressure, and I love learning the game at the same time. I knew I'd play specific games. It was sort of on that level, and we sort of got that understanding straight away, as much as it frustrated me and I didn't feel, sometimes it was the right call. I understood that at least I had that respect for the manager, where at least he's trying to win the football game and he's doing the best possible thing he can to win that game. So that was... your understanding of the game needs to be a lot more, and you also need to try and treat it as making the same impact you were having before. A lot easier said than done, but trying to bring those attributes that made you successful back into Championship football. So
guys at different levels, how can, you've spoken about understanding the game a couple of times. You obviously worked with some great managers that you've just mentioned, and that they helped you understand the game. But how can a guy who might be in a lower level, who wants to progress but doesn't necessarily have the same, obviously, manager and who's an influence on them, how can they better understand the game? What sort of things can they do?
Well, there's so many games on telly. We're go and watch live football matches. Go and see what's working for a team against another team. Why a team won? Possibly come back from that game and try and understand. Why did that team win? Why did that striker get a hat trick? What did he assess in the back line that that made him get them goals? Just little things like that. I would do personally. Someone I grew up loving watching was Rooney, and he was my idol as a young age, and I would study little things. Teddy Sheringham was another one I loved. My dad absolutely loved him, and then I loved him. Mark Hughes as well. Used to just watch little clips on stuff he'd do. Used to watch. Obviously, you've got so many books out there. I mean, not a lot of people like reading, but there's so many different things. Just fill yourself with as much knowledge as possible to just stand you in the best stead. I'm not so much anymore, but I used to watch a lot of football matches. I'm not the best at it. I could give advice all day, but I'm not the best at it. I mean, I sometimes would rather sit there and watch a full day's Test cricket than watch a football match.
You put cricket on now?
Yeah, it's on there now. I'm desperate to turn around and look and see if South Africa have taken any more wickets. But watch football matches. You've got such an array of games on the telly at the moment. Try and understand what's going on in games. Don't just look at it in black and white.
What was the environment of a Championship club like? Was it any different to Exeter? Like, I mean, you've spoken about being busy once in this conversation already, and that, in my opinion, being busy at the moment in modern day football is actually like a necessity. The people who aren't busy, you're going to fail. And it's not looked at anymore as in like, oh, you're busy, that's such a bad thing. Like, if you're not busy, like you got no chance. What was it like in the Championship? Was everybody on it? Were all the players doing the extras in the gym?
Players were on it. Preston was like, the old training ground especially was quite old school, so it had a similar feel to like Exeter. It wasn't like glamorous at all. It was it was just the intensity. Training you train as you play on a Thursday, Friday specifically before games. It would be very tactically related for the game at the weekend. So it'd all be a gradual build up throughout the week. So there was a purpose to your training other than just going out there and training. So that was, especially probably not being one of the best sides in the championship, you're obviously looking at other systems and how you can counteract that. So that was a lot of that. There wasn't, I imagine the top sides there stick to their game, and this will beat most teams. A lot of them might work that way. So there'll be a lot of focus on them. Whereas I think the teams in the lower half would necessarily, how are we going to beat them? How are we going to nullify their threat and then build off the back of that? I think there's a lot of that going on. So that allowed me to learn a lot that way.
See, obviously now at 28, you signed for Charlton a couple of years ago, 26, 27, 28. As players obviously grow older, naturally they start to become a little bit more experienced. They usually accept a little bit more responsibility, and that's certainly been the case obviously with you this season, because sometimes Jason Pearce, the captain at Charlton, hasn't necessarily played, and you've taken on that role as being the captain. What do you think it is about you and the player and the person that you've become that you think obviously a manager, whoever it is, been obviously the Charlton manager, Johnny Jackson at the moment, has entrusted you with the responsibility of being a vice captain or leading the team obviously on a match day? How have you become that person?
I think I've got relationships with everyone in the team. I think I'm able to talk to everyone, whether it's every walk of life really. I've experienced a lot of things in football. As you know, I'm someone who wants to just joke around quite a lot in the change room, be a big voice, be someone who tries to involve a lot of people, tries to get a lot of team bonding going, tries to get a lot of, stuff away from the pitch sorted first. And I just like chatting with everyone, really. And I'm quite a bubbly character as well. I mean, I try and stay in a very good mood, no matter what what's happened that weekend. A good bit of advice Derek McInnes gave me once was, if I walk into the stadium or training ground on a Monday morning, I don't want to know. It shouldn't matter if we won or lost at the weekend. The vibe should be exactly the same. And I'm massively for that. Too many people, you lose a game and it's the end of the world the week in training. I think that can gather momentum and it can build you into a negative period. So I think that I've been trusted with it because, first and foremost, my performance is on the pitch. And then, it's how I probably apply myself in training and around the training ground.
Do you think you've grown into that responsibility, or do you think you've always had it in you?
I think I've always had it in me. I've really wanted to be a captain. I was vice captain at Exeter, probably, because I was leaving, wasn't trusted with, being a captain because they probably thought this guy's got a release clause, he's going to be bouncing soon. But it's something I've always actually wanted to be, to captain the team. So, when Piercy's not, and I could get no better example. You've played under Piercy, so Piercy's an unbelievable skipper. So he was my first captain and probably the best captain I played under. So it's gone full circle really. I've had the chance to be doing it side by side with him, and when he's not in the team.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the best captains I've played under as well. In terms of example of and standards that he sets for everybody else is sort of top of the list.
His body's exactly the same now as it was, probably better than it was all them years ago.
How can players then who are obviously trusted, we're talking about Jason Pearce being an incredible example, but how can players who are trusted with more responsibility, or like you given a role of being a vice captain, best deal with being put in that situation? Do they have to act any differently? Like, do you feel like you've acted any differently? Like, what happens when you're given that responsibility?
Well, I'm a big moaner, so like the start of the season, I was skipping at the start of the season. Piercy wasn't in the side, and I think I was battering too much. I was the way I was talking wasn't encouraging enough. So that coincided. We had bad results. It was a lot of pressure. Felt like nothing was going well. So since I found myself doing that, and it's almost I took a step back. This isn't working. The way I'm talking, the way I'm trying to conduct myself on the pitch. I need to be better for, refs, for example, to speak to them nicely, to have a good relationship with them, good relationship with the manager, good relationship with our players. So I took it on myself to be a bit more encouraging and try and demand that everyone reacts differently. You can shout and ball at someone, that it's not going to change them at all. Some players it might, some players it might not. So it's understanding different characters within the dressing room and how they individually respond to getting the best out of them.
Did you figure that out on your own?
Yeah, it wasn't a case of me. It was probably because we were on such a bad run. It was trying to look at myself and what I'm doing wrong.
I mean, when you're entrusted with obviously the responsibility of becoming the leader, of being the captain of a match day, who do you go to for advice? Who do you go to for encouragement?
Probably get my encouragement from my family and people around me. I get that from the girls to maintain a nice life, to maintain that my girls and everything has the nicest life possible with the motivation in itself. If I'm going to talk strictly about football, it's I've got a couple lads at Bournemouth who I'm still really good friends with, I can chat to. I've got Piercy at the club who I can speak to on a level about that. And then the managers, I think it's great, especially as a captain, to try and have a good relationship with the manager. Understand where your game's at the time. I didn't have the very best game. Be honest about your game. A lot of people hide under the fact that they're not playing well. I think to get it out there is quite a good thing sometimes.
And would you so your advice for people who obviously want to play that role of becoming a captain, a vice captain, or being a leader? Do you think they need to? How do they put themselves forward, obviously, to do that? I mean, were you asked, do you want it, or did you say, like, can I have it? Like, how does that process work? And do you need to learn to play that role, or do you just need to continue doing what you've done? Yeah,
I don't think you should ever learn or seek to be the captain. I didn't ask for it. Nigel Adkins gave it to me, I guess, from pre-season and how I conducted myself in training each day, and just trying to understand what sort of character I was from chatting. We could talk well to each other. I could speak well with other staff. I had a good relationship with the staff, the people around the club, polite to everyone. That's sort of what you need. You need to be, above all, I think you need to be a good person as well, with good morals to be a captain. I think that's what's been highlighted a lot in the past when captains don't, for example, work at other clubs.
Listen, mate, we've sort of almost finished, almost got you, but you still have obviously many of years left of playing. The pair of us have been friends for a long time, so I certainly have really enjoyed getting to know you. Getting a proper insight into the more detailed part of your career. And I'm going to put you on the spot here, but what would you say the biggest thing that you've learned, or biggest things that you've learned so far in your career are? I mean, you're still 28, you're still a young guy, so up to this point, what are the biggest things that you've learned?
The biggest things I've learned, I'd probably say the advice to stick to what you're good at. Enjoy what you're good at in terms of the threat that I know I have. Make that as best as I can possibly make it. It's practice it every day on the training ground and enjoy being the best in the team at that attribute. Some people are blessed with different abilities. You're not going to be as good as some people at that. But what you do have, try and make as best as you possibly can.
And to finish, mate, what last piece of advice can you give to anybody involved as a player in football, or who wants to become a player, about what they should be doing if they want to be successful?
I think a massive thing that's worked for me individually is you need to understand that it's going to be a roller coaster of a journey. You need to enjoy life away from football just as much as your life in football. You need to be able to come home and enjoy things that motivate you to go back to football. So if you're coming back here and you've not got much to bounce off, you need to, for example, I love taking the girls out for a walk the next day after a game. We like getting in the fresh air, going to some National Trust place, having a walk around. But I enjoy my life away from football so much, whether it's watching the cricket, watching that, because it gives me just that complete relaxation to then fully focus when I'm in football, because I know I'm not going back at home and thinking about football, beating myself up about what's happened. I've got two sort of bits of myself that I enjoy equally. I love my life at home and I love life when I'm at football. It's the best job you'll ever have, and it doesn't last forever. So that when that day comes when you have to hang the boots up, I love everything away from football. I love talking to people. I love the relationships I've built. That I'm going to enjoy that as well.
I think hopefully this conversation that we've had, mate, is obviously going to have an effect on a lot of people that listen to it, because you have had an incredible start to your career. You've been the youngest, obviously the second youngest ever player to play for Bournemouth. Unfortunately, you weren't the youngest player to score for Bournemouth, because I think I know who did that. You've had ups, downs. Obviously, now you're in a great point in your career as a 28-year-old with a lot of responsibility at a massive club like Charlton. So the experiences that you've had, you know, I certainly really appreciate getting to know them, mate, and hopefully, obviously, the benefit that they're going to have for the listeners is going to be, you know, top notch. So thank you very much for your time, Jade. I'll look forward to watching the next few years of your career.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me. Been a pleasure.